Hi, I'm Dionco. I'm a professor at Mary Hill School of Theology, and the video you are about to see is a recording of I Am Who Loves the Prophets and Exile Devotional, a conversation with Professor Marc H. Ellis. And just a context for this conversation, it's part of a course I'm teaching at Mary Hill School of Theology, and the course is called Global Prophetic Voice. It's basically an exploration on the prophetic, on the evolving prophetic, inspired by the work of Professor Ellis. Tell us about your meeting with Reverend Mitri Raheb, who is a Palestinian
Yes,
sexual
I first
theologian.
met in 1984. I uh, had gone to Israel in 1973 just as a tourist, but also to find out as a Jew what was going on there in my own way. I was very young and returned in 1984, but with the proviso that I would meet Palestinians. And at that time, there were very few Jews other than Israeli soldiers who had met Palestinians. And of course, their meetings with Israeli soldiers were not good. And I started to go among Palestinians. And of course, it was very complex because they didn't know who I was and I didn't know who they were. But I knew that I had to go to the other side and to see what was happening and then see what we as Jews were doing to the Palestinian people. So I've known him since 1984. I met him in Bethlehem, and I started meeting Palestinians in the West Bank, in East Jerusalem, and in Gaza, and have been there many times before. So he was one of the first uh, Palestinians that I met, rather than an idea of Palestinians, actually meeting in his home and in his land. They're an enemy.
Okay.
They don't seem to be human, but I realized that they were quite human and they were being deprived of their rights by us. Well, wow, what a transformation in Jewish history. And so in 84 and then in 86 and in 1987, I wrote Toward a Jewish Theology of Liberation because I knew I had to find my voice. And it was through encountering Palestinians and then looking at my history and asking myself, are we becoming like the Christians in Europe that oppressed us? Because I couldn't continually talk about the sins of Christianity without looking at now our own sins. So I had to be honest about it. But that was not simple at that time or even now for many Jews. But it was clear to me from the beginning, I could not be silent. You have to have if you're going to be a thinker or a theologian or a person who's religious, you have to be able to think with a moral clarity, an ethical clarity. You don't always know the answer, but you always know what's wrong. And when you see Palestinians being oppressed by Jews, my own tradition, I have to be able to state that as clearly as I would state the oppression of Jews by others. And that's yes, that is the prophetic. The prophetic looks askance at religious or ideological language or any kind of language that takes away the reality. It sugarcoats it, as Reverend Raheb said. And I was witnessing some Jews who were pretty good on the issue. They were trying, but they were also sugarcoating. And for some reason, and it's not because I'm not flawed, of course, but good, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't sugarcoat it.
About her too. So there's a consequence for the prophetic, and
Yeah,
can you say
in the
something about that?
prophetic, you don't seek out suffering. You don't seek it out as some kind of prize. But if you have a moral clarity and you speak and act, things are going to happen to you and to others. But things are happening to you and others already. The question is where we're going to stand when things are going to happen to us and others, because it's happening. And yes, and of course, I try to follow what's happening in different parts of the world. And in the Philippines, where I have been deprived in certain areas, in the Philippines, you can be killed for standing up. So this is very serious. And for your students who are going to be priests, that is, religious leaders in their communities, this is something you have to ponder, not seeking out suffering for suffering's sake, as if that's some kind of plus or a mantle of yours. I don't believe in that. But you have a responsibility to those on the margins and those who are suffering. And it's all over the world. And of course, it's also very much in the Philippines.
Their voices, and then that is, I think, one of the most difficult part of responding to the prophetic call is finding your voice, and you have written a book about that last year, and it was actually there was actually a Philippine edition which we launched last year. So can you tell us something about how do you find your voice?
Well, it's a mystery in a way, but part of it is encountering others who have found their voice. And some people have their voice and know their voice very early. We don't know where that comes from. I call it somewhere else, coming from somewhere else, capital S, capital E. And I've had a great series of encounters with people who have found their voice, Dorothy Day and Daniel Barragan and Gustavo Gutierrez and others, Rosemary Radford Ruther. But all of us have that voice inside of us, and most of us keep it down. And we're afraid of it. We're afraid of our own voice. But some of us are born to speak in a way, and others find their voice by hearing others speak. And teaching really and studying is about encountering other voices, which are also our own. So when you hear the prophets in the Hebrew Bible, that's your voice too. Sometimes we say that's their voice, or the voice of Jesus. That's their voice, and they did it, and therefore we worship that, and we don't have to do it. No. Wrong. The voice that tells you that they've done it, you don't have to do it. Wrong. But the voice that opens your voice, that's the prophetic. So I call these prophetic encounters, where we hear our own voice through another, and others hear their voice through ours, and that's what I also call prophet sharing. And I've heard many Christian voices. This is new for Jews, because Jews were very much discriminated against. But one of the great gifts in my life was to hear Christian voices. And they helped me find my own voice, because that voice within the Jewish community, the prophetic, which is our indigenous, was being lost. And they had partly found their voice through the Jewish tradition. So they were representing the prophetic to us. And they were saying to Jews, where are you? It's just like God calling the prophets, basically saying, hello, where are, over here. Come on over here. Or where are you? Come over here. So, yeah, without the prophetic, there is no meaning in life or history. And when we understand that, we know we have to speak in our context, wherever it is, with our own voice, adding to other voices. And sometimes we're a lone voice for many years, maybe forever. No, not forever. We have a tradition of these voices. And we join that tradition or we turn away. But if we turn away, we really can't be faithful in our time. Fidelity is about finding our voice in our own history and then doing something with it.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Ellis. Now, I would like to shift gears to talk about your new book, and uh, and uh, and that book focuses on exile, which is, I think, another aspect of your reflections on the prophetic. And to do that, and to help me, to join me in the conversation, to talk about your book, I have asked three people uh, to uh, uh, to read your book and to share their reactions and their thoughts about
Thank you.
the book.
Thank you very much. First of all, Professor, happy birthday for today, and I wish you more birthdays to come and more writings in the future, challenging us regarding the courses of action needed to be taken regarding the struggles for justice and peace, particularly in the Jewish context. When Koy asked me to read this book, it was a struggle to do with all my teaching job and many congregational work that I have to engage. Yet I was able to find a little time to look into the reading and just to share some insights and probably some questions that nagged me regarding the book. Let me start off by affirming your search. You know, you have started in your book the name the grappling of with the naming of the grappling with naming God. It's a fundamental question, and your book somehow indicates your desire not to control but rather to allow this God to unfold the reality that He wants you to realize. What I find quite difficult to grapple with your book is the style that you have approached it. You will always present two sides. There will be the positive, there will be a negative, there will be a bright side, there will be a negative side, and the reader would be thrown in. What now are you to come up with in your conclusion? And that is a nagging question that I have seen in the book, and for me, it is a very good approach, particularly when you deal with the whole question of standing on a solid ethical foundation. That there is nothing that can be concretized in terms of ethicity, in as much as there will always be two sides, and you have to maneuver and discover along the way how you would be able to respond, particularly given the context that you would like when you are somehow criticizing the Jewish, the Israel's, shift in its gears in its history from one of having experienced difficulties during the Holocaust to being a nation and now to being an oppressive nation to another people. And here is where you are thrown into a challenge wherein you have to come up with how I would, be able to make sense of the richness of our Jewish tradition, particularly in the question of justice and peace when the religiosity, quote unquote, has been corrupted in a system, particularly now experienced in Israel in its Ghettoization, as what you call, of the Palestinian people. Yet, what I see in the book, especially when you go into the dailiness of your life, that's one thing I like in your book, that you go through the rhythm of simply looking at little things that happen today, an encounter, even going to the shop, all of this events that you have articulated, and the journal that you have somehow, consistently put into writing your experiences. What I have somehow saw is here is a man trying to seek, what it means to be authentically religious or a person with integrity as a person, seeking how he can be a prophet, where the prophetic voice can be heard, by looking at the dailiness of life. Yet the dailiness of life is not something that is there, that is left on its own. The beauty that you have put in your book is how you put in many of the dialogue partners. You have many of these. Many of them are contemplatives, none of them are Christians, and yet this dialogical process. And I think you have said that earlier, that in your desire to find the voice in the dailiness of your experience, you were able also to open up to the possibilities that there are other voices would speak probably of the same language that you are in a different perspective, or probably voices that you have not heard within you, and yet to allow these voices to speak to you. And there are many of them that you have written in your book. And for me, those, that approach is something that I can, to celebrate with you. There is something that probably this is my own reading, or probably my own stance, being a moral theologian, in the way that I would read uh, your your perspective regarding your refusal to participate in a Jewish life and culture that would be supportive of the state power that Israel is, exercising over the people of Israel. I think when we deal with the whole question of religious integrity or and religious authenticity, and to stand on a solid ground ethically or morally. At the heart of this is, I think, the search that we all long for to be human, And I think this desire in you to live this out and to live out the authentic humanity can only find its grounding in no less than thinking of the other. And you have rightly said that earlier, that there will always be the other to be the point of reference, so that even that extelic perspective and even that prophetic perspective that you would like to take will always be grounded not on my own, but always in the desire to seek what will be the good for the other. And I think that's where the prophetic tradition should be characteristically, to stand out. That it is in the course of our own grappling with our voices that this symphony of voices, which would bring about the true identity of this reality, quote unquote, that you don't want to name, God, would come about. That ultimately, when we have sought the good in the other or through the other, we have discovered this phenomenon or reality we might call God. And I think that is the role of the prophet, to be able to enter into the symphony of the word, trying to bring out or trying to reach out, so that here in the course of this, music of the world, we are able to find and discover that ultimately the good that we discover in the others is the discovery of the God that we all long for. That's how I would sum up the book. And it's a beautiful book, but it's a very difficult book to read if you're not familiar with the Jewish consciousness, which you represent truly in this book. Thank you very much, Professor, and happy birthday, no? And I really congratulate you for having this book. I also have another book that Corey sent me, plus your Liberation Theology book. Thank you very much.
Well, yeah, it's always interesting for people to talk about my book, something that I've written, because I experience it in another way. And as Father said, I go back back and forth, and yeah, in my chapel of love. But I think the thing that's interesting too, what he talks about, that the prophetic voice is not only the voice of the prophet, but the encounter with the other, and that the other enters into the prophetic voice. So it isn't a single voice, the prophetic voice. And a lot of it's daily life. I like that emphasis too. People I meet on the beach during my walk, and they all have stories. And of course, for priests, they're dealing with mostly what we call ordinary people who have full lives of their own, but they're not writers or lecturers. And to pay attention to that and to interpret it. So uh, I liked what Father saw in my or heard in my book, and I understand it can be difficult at times. The
Thank
typical
you.
devotional of which this is a devotional, as I understand it in the Christian, is you have a scripture and you have a comment. My devotional is not like that. Mine's an exile devotional that doesn't start out with God or scripture, but tries to ask about scripture and God and history, and without coming to a definite point, but having a place that we stand in. And I think this is standing in a place, but being open to the questions in the world and the sky and the walker who's passing you by, and a continuing conversation.
Thank you, Koy. Mark, if I may call you Mark, thank you
Please.
for this work. You disturb me. this, this devotional. So I wrote down what I could just to give some limit to what I would like to say, because even with this, I really think it doesn't even scratch the surface of what's deep inside me that has been the effect of this book on me. So to begin with, one memory that came to me when I was helping myself to accept Koy's invitation for this morning was a gathering of the religious discernment group last year. I was invited to share my reflection on the theme, "Do not be afraid, disruptive and prophetic voice." So I dared to share some of my own life lessons or insights. It was mostly from patterns of recognizing God's call in all circumstances, moving from fear to courage, to be able to respond, and then welcoming disruptions as impetus for change. Accepting to react to your newest book, I Am Who Loves the Prophets, is a disruption I so welcomed. I anticipated excitement for the freshness this could bring. What I did not anticipate was the intensity of what I call the quake, shake, like an earthquake, that it could do to me, my present stance as a reluctant prophetic, and my current privileged position as a woman religious leader, if I may call myself that. Um, I'm not apologetic for my newness in this area of Jewish struggle. I am aware of what's happening. I'm aware of the oppression of the Jewish over the Palestinians, but I don't really find myself fully engaged in it as I chose to be someplace else. Now, as a devotional, even myself, being limited in my exposure to devotionals by choice, I find the style of this meditation of sorts, as you call it, special, if not unique. Not having an easily discernible format is its format. I find that the thoughts you shared in short phrases, many in one word statements, are the sharpest, most profound articulation as far as I'm concerned. Not only did this slow down my reading, these also, and more importantly, slowed down my judgment of how this devotional could be a companion in my own faith journey. And as you proposed, how this could spur imagination for my own devotional. As I moved along, my pace changed. I was no longer simply reading a book that I have to react to on this day. I was praying the meditations of an exile, a permanent exile. From time to time, I would look up the meaning of words unfamiliar to me. And like Father Kaloy was saying, they're not really easy. And I don't have such a world of vocabulary to with me now. And then I stayed the course until the meaning of the word or the words evolved in its context. Maybe for you, simple words like platitude, viscerated, I needed to really understand what they meant in the context that you were saying. Your abstract paintings that introduced each of the three parts is more than a wise, I think, more than a wise choice for partitioning. To me, each painting makes visible the randomness, the colorfulness, and paradoxes in an exile's life, recognized, accepted, and shared, just as they are. I enjoyed the snippets of your teaching and learning moments with your sons, Aaron and Isaac. In fact, I thought I would be able to read some more of them in the later part. But that each part, I went back just to see, because I had that feeling that you would all mostly end each part with, and then you begin again. And I like that kind of welcoming that it's not going to end there. It is again another beginning. Um, your snippets, your stories with your sons, they could be part really of my favorite in the book. The depth of the lesson is in the simplicity and, like what Father Kaloy said, the everyday lifeness in your relationships with your sons and the people around you. With your sons, I saw the father-son, yes, yet seemingly there was some sense of equality in your spiritual quest. They gave me some kind of, those parts gave me some kind of a welcome respite from the journey that was going deep, deep, and even deeper. Now, my next part will be something about an encouragement for a new narrative. In this devotional, I read paradoxes all over. I even wrote them down as I encountered them along the way. Paradoxes like bound, free, alone, together, solitude, solidarity, undo, construct, before, after, lose, gain, hard, soft, darkness, light, out there, inside, natural, unnatural. And maybe I can go on and on and on. I'm a woman, I can be so detailed. But they open up my alertness, maybe another's alertness, to the totality of a reality. They address our tendency to see a thing, a situation, a point from one end and perspective and miss the other, and then begin to believe what we think we see, understand, and know as the absolute truth, as if that sets the reference for everything. And anything outside that is wrong, queer, or unacceptable. But the way these paradoxes were presented, affected by some repetition, led me to see the need to hold in balance, or even the impossibility of it, the two ends of a spectrum in one's sense of liberty, in relationship with people, in time, texture, pressure, color, location, nature. At the same time, realize that there is a great gap between what we want and what we really are in life. And this gap of what we want and what we really are in life, I have been very deeply involved with trying to integrate and bridge this in my work of 12 years or and more in formation. I am grateful to you for your plea to present and reflect on realities as they are, like Jesus as a prophetic figure, as a Jew, the Exodus as liberation event and the oppression of the Palestinians by the Jews. Just like enjoying the poems and reflections on the beauty and goodness out of this pandemic, at the same time conversing about the lies and manipulation of some governments at the expense of the poor and the most at risk. Can we speak of the splendor of creation and initiatives for ecological lifestyle, which is an in thing now in the church, without engaging in eco-justice issues and actions? I quote one part in the devotional: precious life is being dishonored everywhere. Prayer cannot stop the oppression. Does God hear my mournful prayer? When I read this, I felt an almost direct tears in my heart. For several days last week, the previous weeks, prayers in the community, our community, were expressed with tears, cleansing our troubled hearts as we prayed about the troubles of our times. The killing of a peasant leader who is also a peace negotiator, the tug of war over his dead body between family and police officers. Then another killing, Sarah, a woman human rights worker. The corruption that besieged our Philippine health insurance. The rising figures of COVID-19 cases and deaths of our frontliners. The call for a revolutionary government, our president or Duterte's unbelievable reactions to reason outside his own, and voices of dissent. Hard and dangerous to distinguish fake news from the truth. Your meditations that have become mine invite us to look again, many times over, at what we really say we stand for. And for each time, I suggest to the students around here to take Mark's one-word statement questions. Ask what this really means. You know, like whatever we believe in. I read again the 5 lessons, life lessons I shared about being prophetic, where prophetic comes from, and then I connect immediately your phrase questions. Are you sure? Really? Are you certain? Believing in God, rootedness in God, which God? We take another look, dig a deeper path to our cliches, our stock answers, to daily life's call. Take another look at our safe positions in the face of harder choices. In our present day challenges, the church is being called to be more visible, to be a figure of hope and courage. Mark this in this, your devotional invites trouble, especially when you said towards the last part, to be a religious person is not about hope, not even close. So I said, then what is it to be a religious person? I don't intend to have a final answer to that. I just leave it hanging there because exactly that's where I am, to stay with the questions that I encountered here. But I like and I want to read this whole paragraph for us all. It's actually a vision. How do you pronounce the name of Simone Weil?
They.
Weil. Yeah, she's a French Jewish mystic. I never knew her before, but I love her now. She said, and I thank you for lending this to us also. A new kind of sanctity is needed, is indeed a fresh spring, an invention. If all is kept in proportion and if the order of each thing is preserved, it is almost equivalent to a new revelation of the universe and of human destiny. It is the exposure of a large portion of truth and beauty, hitherto concealed under a thick layer of dust. I hear the voice of the indigenous peoples here. My present mission assignment is really in Bukidnon in Mindanao, but I'm locked down here in Manila. I am drawn to their journey of healing from historical injustice. I dream and aspire for this new kind of sanctity. It's nice to say that. But then again, I borrow your question. Very troubling, very disturbing. Really? Am I certain? Rather than questions of doubt, these questions are really an invitation to go to the edges, what we call the liminal space, and stay and see what emerges. And as I don't know what will do, what this will do, but I'm saying this devotional is certainly not providing answers in our spiritual quest. The devotional asks more questions, but it also generates more than questions. It invites to a deeper space where we need to really be strong and say, who am I? Who is God? And which God is this really that I am following? Whose will I'm really following? An invitation, okay, this is an invitation to stay at the liminal space. We know that several years this has been a big mistake, but I also believe the prophetic is said to be inherent to religious life. Opening up and learning from other religions build a path to this new sanctity as I understand it now. As a religious, striving to be faithful, as a religious, trying to live mindful or to like to live life mindfully, to make discerned choices, a woman religious, called to leadership, responding in the best, most honest way I could. We can actually excavate and explore the paradoxes as we live our religious vows. What do the vows do to the prophetic in us? Are we finding our voice? Do the vows nurture, tame, or silence the prophetic voice in us? Or do they awaken, animate, and empower? I think I have spoken more than enough. I will need more time. I look forward to meeting you face to face, body to body, Mark. But at this point, I want to thank you for this devotional. I want to thank you for the life, the journey, and your commitment to justice. I thank you for your honesty to say no hoopla, no sugarcoating, the paradox of simple, profound. I thank God you were born. I thank God you were born a Jew. I thank God you are living your life as an exile. Thank you for your exile prophetic life. May your birthday today celebrate enough what has been and what is yet unfolding. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sister
That's
Ella.
beautiful. And again, hearing other voices who have read my voice or encountered my voice deepens my own words for me. And I'm so grateful that Catholics today, unlike years ago, can think religiously and can encounter questions that don't have answers without being afraid, or being afraid and walking with their fear. And it also deepens my faith because as a Jew, I have a certain journey, but to hear these other voices that are dependent on the Jewish indigenous, but have their own path as well, helps me understand at a deeper in a deeper way, my own voice and adds to it. So this is what I call interfaith solidarity. It's not a dialogue or a deal. It's a deepening, a mutual deepening. And I'm so grateful that I could live my life at this point in history where Jews and Christians can speak honestly to one another. It's a revolution in religious history. What we just experienced with the two respondents to my book, a priest and a sister, we don't think of it as revolutionary, but if you look at the history between Jews and Christians, it's the biggest revolution in Catholic history, in my view. But it also benefits not only Catholics to be open, but Jews to be open. So both are very moving to me. They're my words, and I wrote them, but they come back to me at another level. So I'm very grateful for two voices who have read my work and who are then become teachers to me about what I wrote.
Hello, Dr. Ellis. It's great to see you again, even though it's like this, no, but yeah, it's always great to see you. I was hoping that you could come to the Philippines, especially in this first semester of our school year, so that I could meet you personally and also attend some of your lectures and seminars. But anyway, we have this situation now. But I am so glad to be here with you today. I wish you a happy birthday, that you may always be healthy and blessed in your prophetic journey. So, Dr. Koi Dionco asked me to give a kind of reaction to your new book. I still remember my first encounter with you, which was last year when you came to the Philippines. At that time, you came to launch your latest book at that time, which was Finding Our Voice, Embodying the Prophetic and Other Misadventures. And I remember that when I was about to enroll for my next seminar at MST, I saw that title, No Jewish Theology and the Prophetic. And at first, the first thing that came to my mind was, oh, this will be a biblical kind of seminar. That's why I will enroll in it, because I love the Bible, you know, I love biblical studies and everything. So I will enroll in it. And I did not know who were the professors, no, who would give that seminar. Only later on I found out that it was Dr. Coy. And then on the first day of our seminar, she told us that we were going to have a Jew professor, an American Jew professor, and then he was coming to the Philippines to launch his book. And then I said, wow, I guess that will be nice. I never met a Jew before, so I think this will be a good experience. And perhaps he may answer he may answer to many of my doubts about the Bible, and especially the Jewish Bible. No? Little I knew that our course would have little to do with the Bible, and little I knew that the prophetic was actually such a broad understanding of the world and everything. Because as Dr. Ellis always says, the prophetic is always evolving. The prophetic goes on and goes on. And that is why I remember that in our course, we studied so many contemporary prophets of today, such as Martin Buber, Abraham Joshua Heschel, and Dr. Marc H himself. So that was a complete new approach to the prophetic to me. That was a different kind of image that I could have of Jews. The lectures by Dr. Ellis broadened my understanding about the Holocaust and about what is going on in Israel and in Palestine right now. And that was really something unique to my personal journey. That's why I describe my personal encounter with Dr. Ellis as a great source of inspiration to my life. I am still young. I am still trying to find my voice. I don't know if I have completely found my voice. I am still struggling, but be sure, Dr. Ellis, that my encounter with you has helped me in my discernment, in me finding my voice. Now, when it comes to the books by Dr. Ellis, I have to agree with the previous reactors. His writings are not easy to be read. I also have struggled a lot with his style and with his words, the way that he writes. I remember the first time I read Dr. Ellis was in Finding Our Voice. And then when I started reading the book, I said, my God, what does he mean with those words and with everything? But as we went on with our course, and as I was listening to you, especially during your lessons and everything, I somehow could grasp, a little bit, I guess, of what you mean. And here comes I Am Who Loves the Prophets, an Exile Devotional, another great work by Dr. Ellis, but also quite difficult to be read and quite difficult to be understood. But I remember that one time we watched a video of Abraham Joshua Heschel, and then Heschel was actually advising young people, do not read the bestsellers. That I remember very well. Do not read the bestsellers. In other words, I think that what he means is that read that which is difficult, that which will make you be grounded, that which will not entertain you so much as to take you away from what is going on down here. Uh, read that which is not so easy to understand, because there where is depth and profound meaning is located. And this is what I guess that the book of Dr. Ellis is all about. It is difficult to read, but it is of such a great depth. One of the things that touched me most about the whole thought of Dr. Ellis, aside from his prophetic advocacy and the way that he speaks against what Israel is doing to the Palestinians, is his ideas or his thoughts on God, or his theological thoughts. Because seeing a Jew at first, I thought that his Jew would talk so much about God, or that he would be referring too much to the Bible and everything. But little by little, I observed that actually God, in the thought of Dr. Ellis, occupies a quite marginal space. I mean, as if God is set aside a little bit. Okay, so let's set God aside a little bit, and let's focus on what is happening here right now in the world. And the reason why Dr. Ellis does that is because without the prophetic, there is no meaning in the world, and the prophetic is actually the reason for God to exist. This is something of a very great depth for me, because coming from a Christian background, I was always used to being uh, told about God, God, God in the first place, and not being so much concerned with what was going on down here. So God would always come first in our theological discourses, and then later on, reality. But it seems that Dr. Ellis goes the other way around. He first deals with reality and with the prophetic here and now, and only then, only because of the prophetic, God is possible, and God can be actually with us or whatever. And this is of great depth to me. And when I think of it, this somehow helps me to deepen my own spirituality as well. Because we may think that this is not of such spirituality, but it is indeed. And his book is a devotional, a different kind of devotional. It's not pious, it's not individualistic, it's not concerned with my own spirituality, because that's what most Christian and Catholic devotionals are concerned about, with my own spirituality, with my own achievement of a kind of spiritual life, and my own achievement of God, and being good with myself and being at ease with myself. That's not what the devotional of Dr. Ellis is all about. He doesn't talk much about the Bible here. He doesn't even talk much about God, but he talks about the prophetic, which embodies concrete reality in the world. And only then we can have the possibility of God. This idea is also reflected, I guess, in his own naming of God. No, I am who loves the prophets. God for Dr. Ellis is not I am or I am who is with you, but I am who loves the prophets, meaning without the prophets, God, there is no God. God doesn't exist. So it seems that the prophetic and the prophets always set the conditions for the existence of God and for God itself. So after that, I wonder, am I a religious person at all? Am I, a believer in God at all? What am I in that kind of thought? Because as I said, I don't know if I am a prophet yet. I am still trying to find my voice and I am still studying. Although Dr. Ellis says that the prophetic cannot be studied, but I am still also studying and reading more and trying to deepen my own knowledge and my own understanding about the prophetic. So to sum up everything that I said and that I shared, to me, this devotional is quite spiritual. Many people may think that it is not, but to me it is quite spiritual. And it helps me a lot, together with other works by Dr. Ellis, to deepen my own understanding about the prophetic and my own commitment as well, right now and for my future ministry. So thank you very much once more, Dr. Ellis, for making this devotional available to us and for sharing with us your voice, your writings, and just keep it on. Just keep it on. That's all that I have to say. Thank you.
Well, Gustavo is another beautiful, challenging review. These reviews of my book challenged me quite a bit in a wonderful way. And yeah, religious people tend to be afraid of religious questions. It's very interesting. But those who open themselves up to religious questions are more deeply religious. And we find that too, that often the people who say, I don't even want religion, don't talk to me about God, when we encounter them, often they have deeper reflections on life than the religious that we're living with. And it's a challenge because once you go deeper, who do you talk to? Well, there are others who are also going deeper. Where do you find them? Well, Gustavo found one in a Jew. Well, how about that? But I also have found them in Catholics. Oh boy, what about that? And Buddhists and secular people and women and men and, so I loved all of these reviews. I didn't know I was so difficult to read, but uh, uh, what a birthday I'm having. Thank you. And I have to say this, because I don't know whether we'll get to it. Not only was the book published in the Philippines, but this course, Thinking About My Thought, is the first course that I know of that has done that. My books have been read at Harvard and Yale and all over the place, but a full course on my thought, that it's coming from the Philippines, is very interesting to me and I think important. What does that say to us about faithfulness in history and the question of God? Thank you so much
Thank you.
wow, I've done many Zooms and many interviews and many lectures, but I've never had quite a time like tonight where we had these special guests and these reviews and well, it's a very special birthday already for me, and it's not even my birthday until tomorrow here. But I feel like I've already started my birthday. And thank you so much for taking my thought so seriously and representing it to me so I can take it seriously at another level too. And wow, I don't know what much more to say except the reviews of my writing and these special guests and following the classes I have and coming back next week and being invited back. Wow, that's really something. Sometimes I'm not invited back. So thank you so much. Yeah, Professor Roy, thank you so much for doing this, and thank your students and our reviewers and our special guests. It's like a show. It's been very meaningful, very, very meaningful to me and emotional, moving. And I wish you all well and hope to see you next week. And thank you so much.